Okay, so today, welcome back to the laws of Tzedoka. This is the second class we're having on that. So just to summarize what we did yesterday, we spoke about the importance of Tzedoka, how it's a sign of the descendants of Abraham, how and that's what keeps us strong as a people. It's greater than all the offerings. It brings redemption. The person won't become poor from it. If we're merciful, Hashem will be merciful to us. Hashem listens to the cries of the poor. And realize that it's a revolving wheel. What we have today, our children or grandchildren, if not us, might not have it. Therefore, the only thing we do have is that which we give. Now, who is required? We said everybody needs to give tzedakah according to their abilities. How much to be given? We said if it's a person that's coming privately only to you, then you should give him whatever he needs. If you know that he's making the rounds, then you can give him a small amount so that gradually between everybody he will be able to have what he needs. And then in number 4, wow, that was quite a complicated one, but just to summarize that once more, a person should originally give 10% of whatever money they have, and then any profits that come in thereafter, after subtracting any business expenses, one needs to give 10% of that. And the more complicated scenario, which we said could exist in COVID, is let's say a person has 100,000 Rand in the bank, and let's say 1 million Rand in the bank, and then they usually make 50 grand a month, and the expenses are 40 grand, let's just say, and now suddenly they're only making 30 grand. So first of all, 1 million Rand in the bank, that money, if it's never been tied, they've got to give 100,000. And once they've done that, so now they have 900,000 in the bank. And now each month, what they're having to do is, since the expenses are 40 grand and the income is 30 grand, so each month they're having to take 10 grand from the other 900,000. So since the person still has that 900,000 in the bank, it means he's not poor. He has that savings. So therefore, when talking about his monthly expenses, or his income, I guess just like you need to reduce, it's like tax. Just like you need to accept that you can't deduct what you can deduct for tax. But what I mean is like this: just as if you're making 40 grand, so that's your gross income, you got to know your bottom line after tax. That's really what comes to you. So the same thing goes for stock. As long as you're not in the category of a poor person, even if you're only making 30 grand and you need 40 grand to live, you would still first need to detract 3 grand of that 30 grand, give that to tzedakah, and then it means you're only making 27 grand, and if your monthly expenses are 40 grand and you're not able to cut that down, then it means that you'll be taking not 10 grand from your savings, but you'll be taking 13 grand from your savings. I don't know if you followed over there, but that was pretty much a summary that 10% needs to be given over any profits before applying them to any expenses, provided that the person is not poor, meaning that they still have savings that they can bank on. Okay, that was number 4. Now for number 5. So we're going to speak more about tzedakah in general. Kind of number 4 went into detail of 10%. We'll speak about tzedakah in general. It is worth mentioning that although we mentioned yesterday that the tithe should be given specifically to the poor, there's a lot of debate on the details of tzedakah, and although that's what the Kitzur said, it has become an accepted practice that 10% can go towards other mitzvahs that one isn't obligated in. So, for example, if you have something that you are required to do, then you wouldn't be able to use your meiser. But if it's something you're not required to, then you can. So, for example, theoretically speaking, if there is a Torah institute that and you want to support that Torah institute, then you would be able to use your meiser, your 10% towards that, provided that you haven't received a bill that you need to pay. If you've received a bill that you've now used their services and you owe this and this amount, then that cannot come from tithing. But if it's a matter of just a generous contribution towards helping others study Torah, then that certainly would be able to be taken out of meiser tzedakah. So I'll put that in as well. I just don't want to be biased on this one, so I just called up my rabbi and I asked him, and he confirmed. So I didn't actually ask him. There's also how you ask. I didn't ask. This is what I like. is there a way that this could work? No, I asked just generally what's the right thing to do. And he said that that's totally become acceptable practice as long as it's not a requirement on your part and it's going towards supporting others to study Torah, that can be taken from the 10% for Meiser. Okay, some other general important points. If you want to gain merit for yourself, suppress your evil inclination and be generous with your money. And anything you do, for the sake of heaven, should be the best and the most beautiful. So in general, rather than, the old story of the South African Jew that, builds himself a mansion for a couple of million, and then, but then the mansion has 50 doors. And then he finds out the price of mezuzahs, and he is horrified. How can I go? I can't afford it, Rabbi. I'm sorry. A few hundred. I mean, just make the maths. It's 50 times. And then you wonder, did you think that way when it came to choosing your tiles or when you came to choosing your light fixtures? So certainly we need to put a priority that the best of what we have should be given towards Hashem. When you feed a hungry person, give him the best and tastiest of your table. When you give clothing to the unclad, clothe him from the best of your clothes. If you consecrate something for the service of Hashem, consecrate from the best of your possessions, as it said, all the fat, or meaning the best parts, fat represented the best when it came to the offerings, should go towards Hashem. Kol chaylev laHashem. So once we're talking about giving, specifically when it comes to giving towards holy matters, we should be very generous and give of the best of what we have, which sometimes is the opposite of human nature. I recently saw a video of a businessman in New York or in Brooklyn, and it was, I must say, it was extremely inspiring. If I had it handy, I would show it now. But he's done well, and he opens his home in such a way that somebody took a video walking through his house, and basically there's just lots of guys that come in and sit down and eat, and he has just foods cooking the whole time. It's not like he's funding some soup kitchen. It's his house. So you walk into this magnificent home and you see guys are sitting around. He has this room over there, and a couple of guys are sitting and eating lunch in another room. And, and then he says, my wife can't even complain because you walk into the kitchen and it's spotless. But just outside the kitchen, he has, a few, whatever it is, Mexicans cooking up these huge pots of food. And then there's just trays and dishes coming out the whole time. I must say it was an absolutely unbelievable sight that this was his own house in which he lives, and his dining room, living room, people are just coming in and out and helping themselves to lunch. It was quite unbelievable. Okay, now what about tuition? This is a big, big debate. Can you use Meiser? Can you use 10% of your earnings to pay for your children's tuition? So it really boils back down to, are you paying for something that you are owing, or is it something extra? Okay. Meaning, is it something that you're required or something that's extra? If it's something that's required, then you cannot use your Meiser, because then you're basically using your Meiser to cover your own expenses. But if the expense is something that is not required of you, then it's not for yourself, but it's for a mitzvah. So interestingly, the Shulchan Aruch actually says that a person is only obligated to support their children until the age of 6. Now, I wanted to do some more research on this. I don't know exactly what it means. But he says, based on this, once your child is more than 6 years old, you can use your Meiser to pay for your child's tuition. Because at this point, you don't have an obligation to support him. And since it's not an obligation, it means you're not using it for yourself, but rather you're using it to help out your child's get a Torah education, or to get an education. Now, as I say, this is a hot topic and a lot of debate, and different rabbis have different opinions on this. Whether you can use 10% towards paying your child's tuition. Now, one thing that's for sure, that if you have a choice either not to pay tuition or to use Meiser, then rather pay out of Meiser than not pay at all. Because If you're not paying at all, then you're, that's not an option. But the question is whether you are able to take from your Meiser in order to pay for tuition. And many rabbis will say yes, based on what we've just learned, that there's a principle that once your child is over 6, you're not then obligated to pay for his Torah study. And therefore, since it's not an obligation, therefore you would be able to use Meiser towards that. Now, just to clarify, that doesn't mean you don't need to pay the school. It means that technically you don't need to hire a teacher to teach your child. But if you have enrolled your child in a school, then it means you've hired the teacher. And if you've hired the teacher, then you owe him money. But since you didn't have to hire him because he's over the age of when you're required to hire somebody, therefore it could be that Meiser can be used towards that. But practically speaking, if you want to know if you can use your Meiser towards your child's education, ask your LOR, local Orthodox rabbi. Okay. Now, once it is a child over 6, or another example he gives is if it's a father who one is not required to financially support, although we're obligated to honor our parents, we're not obligated to spend money towards the honor of our parents. So since it's not an obligation, certainly you would be able to use Meiser towards supporting your father or your mother, your parents. And in general, not only can you, but relatives take precedence. So here's the hierarchy. If you have a limited amount of money and you want to know who to give, first it comes to immediate family and then extended family, then the poor of your house, meaning your neighborhood, then that of your city. It basically is a circle that goes out and out until every Jew, and beyond that to every human being. I don't know if we mentioned already, however, if you have 2 poor people coming to ask for money, one's Jewish and one's not, then you give them both. You don't make any distinction. But we're talking about when you're at the outset setting up how the money is to be spent. So that would be, as we've just mentioned. However, this that we've said that you give priority to your family, that's only if it's your personal funds. The treasurer obviously needs to distribute the communal charity equally. He can't give more to his own family than to others. Are you with me? Yes. Okay. So we've spoken about how much to give. We've spoken about who to give. And now let's talk about how to give. Whoever gives tzedakah to a poor person with an angry countenance, even if he gives 1,000 gold pieces, has forfeited the merit and violates a prohibition, which says your heart shall not be sorry when you give him tzedakah. You shouldn't have a bad heart. So if you're going to give tzedakah with a grumpily, now he doesn't say don't give because the guy needs the money, but you lose all the merit, which is quite unfortunate. So, there's an old story goes, if somebody says, somebody comes and knocks on the philanthropist's door and he says, please can I have it? He says, no, to be honest, I don't want to, people are watching and I don't want it to look like arrogant. And also, I don't know if I'll give it so kindly, so I'll give it a miss. The poor man turns to the philanthropist and he says, why do I have to lose out because you having difficulties with how you want to give? So obviously, for starters, do the act. That's more important than anything. The action is what's most important. Give, however you give. However, certainly realize that if you're going to give grumpily, then you lose all your merit, which is a pity. Rather give with a smiling countenance, with joy, and care about, show concern for his suffering, as Job said. Did I not cry for the troubled? Was my soul not grieved for the needy? And speak to him words of comfort. As the Torah says, in the heart of the widow, I cause to sing for joy. So V'leiv almana ardin. So this is how to give. We should not give grumpily. If we do, we lose all the merit, although the mitzvah is still there. And rather we should give it with joy and with comfort, with understanding. Okay, here's another halacha. It is forbidden to turn away a poor person empty-handed. Even if you give him only a dried fig, a mere pittance, as it is said, let not the oppressed turn back in disgrace, which is a verse in the Torah. Actually, that verse isn't from the Torah, but the Torah does say you should not turn him away empty-handed. And if you have nothing to give him, then console him with words. It is forbidden to scold a poor person or to raise your voice to him in a shout because he is broken-hearted and humbled. And as it says, a heart that is broken and humbled, Hashem does not despise. Woe is to he who embarrasses the poor. Rather act towards him like a father, both in feelings of compassion and with words. As it says, I was a father to the poor. And as some of you may have heard the story that I mentioned before, I was once staying in an uncle's home, and I had gone to shul in the morning, and there was a guy that was rather annoying in how he was asking for tzedakah. And I gave him something nonetheless. And I finished davening, and I went home to my uncle where I was staying. And suddenly there's a knock on the door, which every day the people knocking on the door. And I open up, and sure enough, it's the same guy. Obviously, I was at this point rather frustrated. I already had to deal with him with shul. Now I just come home, and he's knocking on the door as well. And my uncle wasn't home, but I didn't want to turn him away empty. So I took out another $1, just $1. Took out $1 from my wallet, and I gave it to him. And he complained, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you only giving me $1? And that was it. That was the last piece of straw, and I lost it. I lost it. I don't know what I said to him, but I know that you should be appreciative. And I chill the whole davening, and now I finally get home, and then I still give him some more, and then he gives it to me over my head for not giving him enough. Anyhow, I closed the door. I walked into the house, and my cousin looked at me in absolute horror, like she'd never seen something like that in her life. How can I speak to a poor person that way? And boy, was that a lesson, because I was staying in their house for a few days, and they have every single day of their life people knocking on the door. And within a few days of being there, I lost my cool. And her response was that she was horrified. How could I possibly lose my cool on a poor person? Which was such a lesson, that the way the house acted, that every single person that came to the door to just be compassionate and pleasant and caring and patient. So that was a personal, powerful lesson on how we give. Okay, I see it's already 5:19, but let's try to do one more. Tzedoka, actually, this takes us into another topic, which we'll go over a few halachas. Maybe we'll do 9 and 10 really quickly. So number 9 says, if a person says that they will give this and this amount to tzedakah, it's considered a vow, which means that he's biblically obligated to give that amount. So if a person says, okay, I'll give, boom, without any signatories, without any lawyers, attorneys, the moment you have exiting your mouth the words that I will give such and such towards tzedakah, then you have a requirement to give it, and you should give it as soon as possible, without delay. In fact, if you do delay, then that's a violation. If there's no poor person around, you just made a vow to give this amount and there's nobody to give it to, then you can put it aside. If you said that you'll give money to shul, then you need to give it the moment you asked for it, unless you know that the money is not needed immediately. And finally, number 10, if you say you're going to give money to a particular person, then you're not going to be in violation of delaying until it actually shows up. And finally, you're allowed to set aside money towards tzedakah in general, and then to give it whenever you just see fit. And that's what I spoke about yesterday. It's worthwhile having a Meiser bank account and then regularly putting money aside, and then you can use that fund towards anybody that asks or needs. However, it should be whatever you're putting aside should end up being given within a year. So that's kind of your time frame. You don't want it to sit on the side and not be given at all. Thanks so much for joining. Wishing you a wonderful Shabbos of Lech Lecha. And please, God, we'll continue to learn more about tzedakah Monday, same place,